If you're not willing to take those risks, and because it's media and newspapers and all of the negative press you're going to get, you have to embrace it or you're going to fail permanently.
Hi, I'm Lloyd Armbrust, founder and CEO of Own Local, and this is Broadsheet, the business of news. In this episode, we talk about why newspapers need to act more like startups. We'll be talking with several longtime professionals in the industry who have seen both success and failure in this model, and we'll explore why newspapers need to work directly with startups in their community.
Hi, my name is Steve Dorsey. I'm the Vice President of Innovation and Planning at the Austin American-Statesman in Austin, Texas. So especially today, I think it's really important that newspapers act more like startups as much as possible. Part of my job is that we're trying to create startups in certain parts of the paper, but in general, the newspaper should be more like a startup because it can try things, it can experiment with things, it can be more nimble, it can fail quickly and learn and move forward. And when you think about it, the newspaper is a prototype every single day. We put something in the street, we put it online every single hour, every single minute, and it can change. But we're stuck in the past where we're always trying to be the same thing all the time.
So my name is Tim McDougall. I am the Vice President of Strategic Innovation at the Gazette Company, which also includes Fusion Farm and Vernon Research Group. If you have a 130-year-old company that needs to act more like a startup to become a 150, 160-year-old company and thrive, then you need to find ways to instill that in it. It's not going to be natural for the team to do that. In fact, most people here, there's a lot of very, very talented people here, most of whom did not sign up to come into an area that was going to be heavily disrupted and changing all the time. And most of them signed up because this was a very stable place. It's one of the more stable places you can work in this community, right? So to get that, you have to find ways that are non-threatening and educational, and ways where they can, where people can feel free to learn and also free to screw something up as they learn and not feel like they just, blew a big client or did something terrible.
My name is Kelly Homewood. I'm the Director of Digital Marketing Products at Fusion Farm in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. We do still have to act like a startup. The challenge with that is media companies traditionally don't think like a startup. So there's usually a lot of things that need to be proven before money is spent. And there isn't a lot to prove as a startup. You have to just prove your concept, and then you have to go out and try things. And you have to be able, you have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to take some risks, and that's not traditionally part of a successful media company's makeup.
I think a great example of the old model is what newspapers used to go through when they tried to redesign something. So really, when you think about design and design thinking, that's where the old model really failed a lot. A newspaper would spend a lot of time and money, a lot of very clinical research to redesign itself. And then it would say, okay, we're done. The design is set. There's a style, there's a platform, good. And then it would be 10 years later. And then we might actually say, oh, we need to refresh that. We need to change. That's not good enough anymore. We need to be changing all the time, every day. And whether that's digital, print, services, events, marketing, advertising solutions, it's always got to be refined and refining. A startup would never do that. A startup would never come back with an iteration that's the same and the same and the same. It would always be changing and trying and testing. And we need to be more like that in order to survive.
My name is Austin Trimble, and I'm the Director of Sales for Own Local. I think that newspapers need to think about the things that make a great startup, like trying to make the biggest difference with the smallest amount of money. The hacker ideal of trying to put something together on limited resources instead of thinking of what's the biggest budget and the way that I could blow this out the most, but rather to try to make something really impactful on a more lean budget. I think that they could also try to listen a little bit more. I think as a startup, you want to develop your customer and you want to find out, what do they want? Is this something that they're willing to pay for if that's something that they want? And what you're really trying to get at is, what problem does the customer have?
We have to keep up. We have to evolve our products to be able to deliver as people are wanting to consume news, but we also have to be able to monetize that, and that's what's become more and more tricky.
A lot of what we're doing is trying to make it okay to try things in some cases. We're in a project right now where we're actually working in a whole different method than we're used to. We're trying to move quickly and not have the project fully defined in terms of every little detail as we go forward. We're trying to be a little more agile I don't think it's fair to call it fully agile. I think there's an awareness that we need to be more like startups, but we're not very good at it. So we're just trying to, as we can, make sure that we're comfortable being uncomfortable, to learn as we go, and to not necessarily have a single silver bullet targeted, but be ready to fire lots of bullets, re-aim, reshoot, and retarget.
It doesn't always work out though. Sometimes we need to fail to learn. Take Thunderdome as an example. John Payton created a startup inside of Digital First Media that was meant to take national news and bring them to the local level. It didn't exactly work out, but they learned a lot in the process. Let's walk through with John and see what happened.
I'm John Payton. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Digital First Media, which is the second largest newspaper company in the United States, about $1.2 billion in revenue, and about 7,000 employees, and we have 75 daily newspapers, 800 products in all, digital and print, and we are in 18 states with about 65 million customers a month. Look, Thunderdome was a great idea. It was mine, but it didn't work nearly as well as I'd hoped it would work, particularly in creating the kind of viral content that, say, the local newsrooms wouldn't create. But it did have some remarkable successes in areas that we now do very well in all of our local newsrooms that we couldn't do well until there was a Thunderdome. So Thunderdome became an educational tool that helped the company understand some of the things that it needed to do, particularly in the fields of data journalism, early stages in mobile and early stages in video, for sure. But as I sat back as chief executive, one of the things I have to do is allocate resources. And it became really clear to me that despite this vast audience that we have, locals where our bread's buttered. And so pushing a lot of the services that Thunderdome provided to the company back into the field, saving a bit of money, because in transition and transformation, saving money is always part of what you need to do, it became clear that that was a step that, that we had to take. If you're going to get into the multi-platform business and try to be as flexible as a startup and that are creating new things and very quickly, everybody says you got to get in there and you got to fail fast. Well, fail fast means making decisions like Thunderdome when you think it's not working. And so that's the hard part. It's easy to say, again, and very difficult to do. So I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Even though failure is okay, when we start a new project, we have to be going for success. And there's a lot to be learned about how startups build products and iterate on problems. Tim McDougall and Chris Edwards talk about how they implemented a program that taught this at the Cedar Rapids Gazette in Iowa.
I'm Chris Edwards. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for the Gazette Company, which is comprised of a number of legacy brands as well as our digital advertising agency, Fusion Farm.
We've also taken some of the lessons that we've learned working in that environment, in the startup environment, and brought them back here. So a year and a half ago, we had something called e-commerce camp. And the goal behind that was to say, we think as a group at Fusion Farm, we need to increase our acumen on e-commerce. It's not as strong as it should be. And we also need to learn to work better cross-functionally, which good startups and good, very agile teams do.
We created an environment where we didn't really know a whole lot about e-commerce, but we knew that long-term, we think that e-commerce is going to be the thing that really displaces advertising. It's probably our largest revenue driver, and it may not be next year, but it's probably going to be in the next decade. And we figured we needed to learn from that. And so we challenged all of our employees to create little e-commerce businesses.
And we were also at the time merging a lot of groups that hadn't really worked together before at the same time. And so we offered anybody on a volunteer basis who wanted to join could join e-commerce camp. They would form teams, and we'd give them up to $5,000 to start a small e-commerce website, sell a real product. If they blew all the money and didn't make anything, that was fine. That was a great expense for their education, as long as they learned. And if they did make money, we'd split that with them, if they actually could make a profit on it. To do that, though, they had to come to a weekly class every Friday at 1 o'clock. We had a weekly class that said, here's another aspect of e-commerce. And they had to go through that and learn the process of doing it. So it was a combination of educating them on e-commerce, educating them how to act better as a cross-functional team, and to know each other better and to respect what everybody else here does, because there's a wide range of skills we have here. And also to get them to think like a startup would think as well, and to think more creatively where it's here's just not the assignment, here's the ad you need to produce today, but go figure out a category, go figure out a niche, go create a brand, go create an e-commerce website, go figure out how to connect it to a credit card verifier. Go figure out shipping. All those things, having to go through that whole exercise made the team a lot smarter. We had 40 plus people participate in that.
And we had a couple of employees that were actually on the creative side, came up with an idea to sell coffee online and customize labels for coffee. And they did their own creative, they developed a website, they began putting things together. They also learned a ton about how do you actually market a product beyond just developing something that's aesthetically pleasing. How do you actually take it to market, and what are the tools that you use, and then how do you form a business model? And so those folks did that all on their own.
And so I think they got a healthy appreciation for just how hard good e-commerce can be, but also a lot of confidence that if they went and did it again, they could knock it out of the park.
It wasn't like these businesses are now multi-billion-dollar businesses they developed, but we took an idea that somebody came up with from the front lines and turned it into something that we educated 25 to 30 people on the basics of how e-commerce works, so that as we develop our own products and go to market, and more importantly help our clients, those people already have that experience.
Learning from and even mimicking startups is one thing, but newspapers should consider investing in and even partnering with local startups to help them succeed, especially startups that are in the newspaper's own communities.
My name is Mike Hodges. I'm the president and COO for UT San Diego. One of the things that we're looking at is how can we partner with more startups that are in the local area that can, really sort of leverage the audience that we have, the background that we have, the management skills, and then also provide capital to them. I think that you'll see more media companies invest in these startups because there's an opportunity to leverage all the assets.
We're very close to the startup community and scanning it all the time for new developments. It helps us stay informed inside the company about the kind of things we may need to do. And so as opposed to waiting for that new development, I'm on lots of calls and in lots of meetings at our company where executives are talking to us about things that they see as the next big thing, and we get to try that out.
We've invested in a couple different local startups and are looking at other opportunities, but our home run would be to actually build a tech incubator right within our building here. And once again, leverage the advertisers, leverage the audience, leverage the newsroom, leverage our digital team, and see if we can take these startups to the next level. I always contend that if it works at one newspaper, it quite honestly should work at most other newspapers. So if we can be the, sort of the launching off point and play a part in that would be great for the company.
But a lot of what I do is either scouting or the investments that we do have in some startups, kind of managing those from the investment end and trying to help out as a mentor on that end as well. And then I also I do a lot of work with the local startup and tech scene, just try and help that grow, because I think if we don't help it grow in our own backyard, we're not that credible if we go out elsewhere and try and find it. And there's a lot of latent talent here locally as well that over time, if developed, could be beneficial to us and could help us out in the long run.
So this is the challenge. This is the controversy. What are we supposed to do? What's the solution? How are we going to transition the business model from print into digital? How are we going to survive to keep journalism alive? All of that, all of those things, that's Broadsheet. That's what we're doing here. With your help, we can answer those questions. We can survive. With everyone working together, we can figure it out.
What's unique about a startup is that startups aren't afraid to fail. In a big company, everyone's afraid to fail because they're afraid of losing their cushy salary and their job, and because they create a culture like that. If you're afraid to fail, you're never going to succeed. So you might as well hurry it up and get it over with.
If you don't take those risks, you will fail permanently. And so it's easy to say fail fast. It's easy to say we have an entrepreneurial spirit inside our company. If you actually don't really have them, you're dead, absolutely dead.
So this is Broadsheet, the business of news. Thanks for watching. We'd like to hear your thoughts about what's working and what's not, and what strategies you're implementing locally. You can join the conversation on LinkedIn or follow us at Broadsheet Labs on Twitter. Also head over to our website, broadsheet.org, and make sure you sign up for the weekly email newsletter. We're going to let you know every time we send out a new episode, and that's going to be a really important part of the conversation. Thanks for watching. I'm Lloyd Armbrust, and I hope to see you again next week.